welcome to this episode of Authentic Achievements, where I'm delighted to be joined by the fabulous David Johnson, also known as Turnaround David, who has a 25-year track record of driving organisational change in an advisory capacity. David served as an interim executive or financial advisor to dozens of middle market companies in transition. Throughout his career, David has demonstrated a commitment to thought leadership with numerous speaking engagements topics of business transformation, change management, interim leadership, restructuring, turnaround, and value creation to his credit. David received an MBA from the University of Chicago and completed his undergraduate studies at Fairleigh Dickinson University. David, it is a delight to have you on the show. Welcome.
Kim, thank you so much, and thank you for the kind introduction.
Oh, my pleasure. I've been so looking forward to this because we chatted just the other week, didn't we? When we were getting ready for getting you involved in my latest book. And I just thought your insights were just so insightful. So I'm so thrilled that you agreed to come and join us on the show and share more about your journey with our audience. So
absolutely.
Tell us a little bit more about your journey so far, please.
So I started my journey early on. I started a research project when I was 19 that became a company that I worked on in my early 20s. And that was a wonderful experience. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but failure is a great teacher because it really does prod you to interrogate what it is that you did wrong. And that first entrepreneurial experience and realizing that it didn't work out really kind of launched me into a lifelong quest of what do you do when you take a wrong turn? How do you help a company steer out of that? How do you help them chart a new strategic path and undo the mistakes of the past and actually kind of write a new chapter of value creation?
Oh, I love that, because it's true, isn't it? I mean, we sometimes think that the failure is so final, but it's only final if we allow it to be final. If we instead look at it from the opportunity to learn something and to see what bits did work as well as what bits didn't work, because often it's not everything that failed, is it? It's one element of it. So when we
absolutely
highlight those bits that go, these bits worked, so let's do them again. This bit didn't work, so what can we do differently with that one bit? Then that's when we start to find those opportunities to change, isn't it?
That's right. I think that's so insightful. That binary thinking, this was a complete failure or this was a complete success, is not helpful. Every failure has wonderful lessons that you can learn, and every success has pieces that you can say, well, we didn't need to do it that way. We could have gotten where we were going faster or reached higher if we had avoided this or made a different decision here. I just feel like in failure, there is more time to really interrogate and think, what did I do wrong? Whereas it's very hard for us when we're successful to step back and say, okay, what did I do? Because it doesn't feel like you did anything wrong, even though you could be better.
And I think sometimes as well, I don't know about you, I sometimes am like don't jinx it.
Right.
Just be grateful, thank the Lord, and then don't jinx it by going and digging into it, which is obviously the wrong type of thinking. Because me and my little girl, we've got a family mission statement, which is to live a life of passionate curiosity and to pass our thoughts, words, and deeds through the lenses of, is it kind? Is it honest? And does it add value? And if the answer is no, you change what you're doing. And I'm trying to apply that now to the lessons, which is you've got to go and look at them. You've got to go and see not just things that went well, look at the things that went badly, so that you can now make informed choice, isn't it?
Sure.
And I guess that's what you help organizations do, isn't it? Is find the courage to make the informed choice by going and looking at the details, that lifting the hood up and seeing what's happening underneath almost.
I think that's absolutely right. At the end of the day, I recognize that my clients are bringing me in and they are undergoing some real challenges, but giving people the space to kind of One, understand what's happening, because I've found that too many people who do this work lead with numbers. And don't get me wrong, analysis is important. And at the end of the day, especially when you need outside capital, you need to have a logical analytic story. But there needs to be a narrative. And that's so important for the people that were in the company, for the decision makers, the board, or shareholders who may have been along throughout the journey. What happened and why does this work and not this? Why is this working now, but we tried this 5 years ago and it didn't work? I increasingly spend a lot of time focused on, to different stakeholders, a different level of detail. What's the story? What's the through line? We were at this point, we're at this point now, and we're going here. And why is it working? And why didn't it work in the past? I think that's so important.
Oh, it's so true. I mean, I think that is one of the levelers in life, isn't it? You know, irrelevant of our race or our culture, we teach and we learn through stories. So
Right.
I think once we can get to that story and we can translate it almost so that it makes sense for the audience that we've got. So whether that's our employees, whether that's our potential investors, whether that's our regulators, you know, wherever it is, it's the same story, but you might just need to bring it to life in a slightly different way to
That's
make
right.
it resonate. But I think that's crucial, isn't it? Because if we can get people invested in the story, and they then want the story to have the best outcome because they're
Right.
invested in it, then actually that works so well with your employees, it works so well with your clients, it works so well with your board, with your investors, because they can see what it is they're getting involved in,
Right.
and they can see the part that they're expected to play to make that successful. And I think that it really allows you to take something really quite complex and make it understandable and easy to digest, isn't it?
I think that's right. And as you said, it fosters buy-in.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, stakeholders are differently situated, and it might be difficult to get a supplier to be excited that we're targeting 20% EBITDA margins. But that supplier can get excited that, look, we're rationalizing our supply chain, and I want you to be our A supplier. And this means you get 75% of our business. And by the way, with the rationalization, we think we supercharge growth. They're excited about that. So the stories have implied numbers for the different stakeholders, but I do think it also creates a superstructure where it's easier to create buy-in for the different constituencies you're speaking to.
No, I completely agree. And apologies, Pudding the dog decided
Oh,
to.
you're fine.
Good, not helpful. He was clearly intrigued, but I think I think you're right. It's kind of it's helping people to understand how they fit in. Why is it important to them? Why should they care?
Right.
And the what's in it for them.
Right.
That's usually the reason why they're going to care, isn't it? And I think when we take that effort, when we make those steps, it starts to become a much easier ball to keep rolling, doesn't it?
Mhm.
And to kind of manifest. So you must have learned so many things on your journey, having done this. What would you say is the thing you're proudest of so far?
So, actually, I'm not dressed down. I wore this T-shirt on purpose. It was a gift to me. It says Mr. Liquidity, from the management team at a nonprofit I turned around a few years ago. It was a 120-year-old nonprofit that had a single CEO for the prior 20 years. That CEO was departing, and I was brought in as the interim COO to stabilize the business, rationalize the management team, and prepare the way for his successor.
Yeah.
And when we met, every day I would talk about liquidity. And these are a bunch of very smart social workers and socially minded people. And they didn't know what I was talking about for a while, but they were too polite to tell me. So I've kept this shirt all of these years because, one, I thought it was funny. And two, I think it's a wonderful reminder that it is so easy for us, especially as we get deep in our chosen specialty, to forget that even though we're speaking the same language, we're not speaking the same language. I was using a word around a bunch of very, very intelligent and accomplished people, and they didn't know what I was talking about. And it took them a while to screw up the courage to ask me.
Mhm.
And every day I put on one of my gym shirts. Every day I put on this shirt, I smile because that's a nice little reminder that you have to be mindful of what you're saying, who you're saying it to, and take the time to make sure you're clear. Not clear to yourself, but clear to your audience.
I love that. What a great story. And you're right. I always think it's the role of the communicator to ensure the communication's landed. And
Right.
it just reminds me of, I remember being in a board meeting once and they're throwing around that much jargon. It was embarrassing. And I remember saying to them, I think I know what the answer is. And they all looked. And I was like, I think what we need is a few more TLAs. And everybody nodded. So you know what I'm talking about. So it kind of carried on for a minute or two. And then I was like, can I just ask who'd like to be responsible for getting some more TLAs? And eventually, this one poor soul put their hand up and went, I don't know what a TLA is. And thank you for having the courage to say that. A TLA is a 3-letter acronym, and that's all you guys are talking about. So we've spent half an hour talking about T's and C's, and I know that you three at the bottom think we mean terms and conditions, don't you? And they were like, yeah. I said, you three over there, I think we mean training and competence. They're like, yeah. I said, so you're not even talking about the same thing.
Right.
So we've got to be really clear that we understand what we're debating before we debate it, because if not, we're never going to get the right answer, are we? So I think that's such a gift, isn't it, when you think about making sure that you're communicating in a way that the communication lands for the audience, not for you.
That's right.
So that you actually can have the right conversations.
No, I think that's so important and very true.
I love it. So what would you say has been the biggest learning that you now implement regularly with the organizations that you work with?
So when I started as a consultant in the turnaround and restructuring world, I was a junior consultant fresh out of business school, and you're really cannon fodder. Have laptop, will travel. Your job is to crank up a big financial model and churn it and make sure it's pretty and put together PowerPoints. And it's a great learning experience. It's certainly wonderful training. But what I've learned over time is in a transformational leadership capacity, I really have to discipline myself and my team that the opportunity cost of me solving a problem directly is enormous. So the things I will jump in and help with in month 3, I won't do in month 6. And the things I'll do in month 6, I won't do in month 9. And that's not because I can't. It's because it's so important to build up the capacity of the organization, for the team to understand that for all of us to reach our potential, we have to give those in the organization the opportunity to succeed on their own terms. So I'm going to give you training. I'm going to give you support. I'm going to give you coaching. We're going to spend a lot of time on communication. And then I'm going to let you do something that the first few times out, I know I could do better.
Yeah.
But it's an opportunity cost for, I can do it better, but I'm not going to learn anything. I already know how to do it. I need you to know how to do it.
Yeah.
And
it's skill, isn't it? It's allowing them to grow.
It's allowing them to grow, but it's also I've found it's also the journey of a leader. My job is not to be an individual contributor. My job is to be a catalyst that's a force multiplier for all of the people in the organization. So how do I make everyone 10 or 15% better? And when I think about it that way, it seems less urgent and less important that I am 17% better at a PowerPoint than that person. That person will get up to speed if I give them the opportunity. And I really try to do that.
I love that. And it's so true, isn't it? Because, you know, when we start out, we probably weren't as good at doing the PowerPoint, but we were given the opportunity to keep doing it.
Right.
And then when we go back and we allow somebody else to step into that and start their learning journey. And I think it is that, you know, as a leader, it is about making sure that you empower people to become the best version of themselves. And that involves you giving them the opportunity to do some stuff. And it can sometimes be hard, can't it? You know, I find it hard. When you think, I could do that in 5 minutes, it's going to take them 2 days. It's like, you know, because if I never, you know, it's a little bit like with my little girl, you know, if I never let her try, it's always going to take her forever to do it. So
that's right.
Yes, it was going to take a little bit longer. Yes, it's probably going to be a little bit messier than if I did it myself. But if not, I'm going to take away her passion for wanting to learn. I'm going to take away her desire to understand how to do it and do it better. And I used to see that in the teams that I led all the time. And I inadvertently once managed to really offend somebody. So I got a really dull job of creating this spreadsheet that was really boring. And I was like, my team are busy doing other stuff, I'll do it. And didn't realize that inadvertently, one of the girls who did all the spreadsheets came over and went, don't you think I can do it? And I was like, I know you can do it. It's really simple. I just thought, you know, you're really busy. You probably don't need to do that. She went, but if I'm really busy, aren't you really busy? And like, it's a
fair point.
But I just didn't want to give you a really dull job. And it was probably about 15, 20 years ago, but it was a real lesson for me in going, I thought I was being helpful, and inadvertently I was making them feel unappreciated and undervalued by choosing to do it myself rather than allowing them to do it and take a little bit longer maybe, but to learn from that. And I think that's so invaluable in what you do, isn't it? Because part of your role is to make sure that the organization is ready for your departure, and that only happens if you've upskilled everybody to be able to do what it is that you do for them.
That's exactly right. The change in organization, you're changing positions and you're putting new people in, but I have a philosophical approach. I don't try to create a mercenary army. So I'm an outsider, and obviously if we need outside skill sets, we will bring them in. But as much as possible, I like to promote from within. I like there to be a lot of cohesion in the leadership and management ranks. And I very consciously and very purposefully look at the team that I'm building and the culture that I'm building such that when I leave, it's not going to be disruptive.
I love that. Well, because that's your legacy, isn't it? You know, when we go in and we transform something, we only transform it if it stays transformed when we've gone. If not, we had like a little bit of an impact, and then it
exactly,
and then it disappeared. So I think that's part of. I was given some great advice many years ago, which I've tried to live by, which is your job is to make yourself completely and utterly dispensable through competence, not incompetence. But you've got to kind of like make sure that actually it operates without you, because then what you do is you leave it in a place where it's going to continue to thrive. Because I think that, you know, in my opinion, organizations are usually in one of three places. They're either in run, grow, or transform. And the skill set you need to transform, like your skill set, is very different to the skill set that you need to just run it.
That's true.
So it's making sure that you're putting the right people in the right roles at the right times to enable the organization to go on the journey it needs to go on.
And recognizing that it's a journey. I've had the great pleasure of working with a number of very talented people. One or two of them I've had some polite but long-running disagreements with, because there's always the temptation, oh, why don't I take a full-time role here? I'm good at transformation. I'm not the steady state person. I'm not. And I think that I am not alone in that. talented as I believe I am, I also need to make sure I'm picking the right situations for myself. And it's also important that in leading an organization, you're fostering a level of honesty. Are you the right person for this role? What characteristics does the next leader need? I always tell the boards that I'm reporting to, your next leader should not be like me.
Yeah.
If they're like me, we did something wrong. You shouldn't need my skill set next time. You should need something completely different. I'm handing the baton to someone who is radically unlike me.
I love that. And it's so true, isn't it? It took me a long time to realize transformation was the place I play best. And it was only actually once when I inadvertently, my boss thought it was hilarious. I bought a pub while still running a big organization, and I chefed in it in an evening. And I said, it's because I realized I'm bored. Because when I came in to do the job, it needed transforming, but I took it on as a permanent role.
Okay.
And once it was transformed and it was just running, I couldn't have been more bored if I tried. I needed to do something else. And it was my moment of realization, which is transformation. I love. I love the problem solving. I love the taking people on the journey. I love the helping them see how they get across whatever they need to get across. I said, but once they're over there, you don't need me, and I don't play well in that space.
Right.
It's not right for me. So you then, to your point, it's finding them the right people, but it's helping them understand that journey that says you need different people at different points of that journey, because they're going to need a different skill set. They're going to need to have a different driver, I think. Because what drives you, if you like, transformation is very different to what drives you, if you like, to just run a business. Because
absolutely,
play in the messier space, don't we? Where you've got to have the more difficult conversations and the more challenging areas, which isn't for everybody. And I guess that's why people use people like you to kind of help them on that part, because it is a unique skill, isn't it?
Thank you. That's very kind. I like to think that it's rare and unevenly distributed. Certainly not unique, but it's so true. We have to be honest with ourselves, and if the work isn't feeding us, there's plenty of work out there to be done. Go find the work that feeds you.
I love that. I think we have to find the thing that makes our soul sing, and then do our best to do it all the time, because that's us living our best life, and it's where we'll operate at our best because we're enjoying it. It's something that feeds us. Whereas if we're doing things that don't, I think we can do them, but we probably don't do them with any joy for ourselves, and not a huge amount of joy for anybody else that's interaction. Because don't you, if you've got to do stuff that you don't want to do, it has a different energy level with it, doesn't it?
It really does, and it's almost inevitable. We're human beings. We're fed by all of these things that we do, that we spend our time with, and if it's not feeding you, it's not worth it.
No, I couldn't agree more. So, if you had to go back and give your younger self some advice, what would it be?
Oh, that's always a tough one. I would have counseled my younger self that the most important thing, and I think I kind of fell into this, but I think I fought it for a while. The most important thing early in your career is the experience you're getting, and block out the noise. It doesn't matter what your former classmates are doing. It doesn't matter who's posting what on LinkedIn about where they're at. If you've got a plan and you're working that plan and it is what you want to do, just do that and love it. I ended up getting there, but I feel like looking back, I twisted myself in too many emotional knots when really I was just doing what I wanted to do. I just couldn't, I had a hard time giving myself permission for it. Oh, this doesn't make sense. I'm trying to get into the turnaround and restructuring industry in the middle of a boom. No one else is doing this. What am I missing? I don't think I was missing anything. I just found the thing I wanted to do.
I love that. But we do so often, don't we? Look at other people and kind of, I think we've created a compare and despair society. So we compare ourselves to everybody else and then despair that our messy reality looks nothing like their airbrushed perfection. We find ourselves lacking. And I think when we give ourselves permission to pick our own goal, there's been parts of my life where sometimes my goal in life is to adult appropriately for 12 hours. It's like, if I can do that, might not be a goal, but I'm going to think that's successful right now.
Absolutely.
But I think once you give yourself that permission to say, I'm pleased for everybody living their goal, but I'm not going to compare it to mine because that's their life. It's not my life. And I think, sadly, we learn it too late in life, don't we? It kind of comes back to us like, why didn't I know this when I beat myself up for like 20 years because I wasn't going fast enough or being seen to achieve the things everybody else wanted to achieve. It's like when you look back, my friend bought me this actually the other week, which I really loved. It was a little quote on it saying, I didn't realize we were making memories. I just knew we were having fun. And I love it because it's like, you're right, at the time, you don't realize what you're doing is creating the memories you're going to live for the rest of your life. At the time, you're just, you're perhaps not as present as we could be because we're rushing to somebody else's goal.
Right.
Once we realign ourselves to our own goal, it's like you start to really get present to the moment, don't you? And take advantage of as you said, it's the journey. I think sometimes we worry it's the destination and we miss out on the fact that the true joy comes in the journey that takes us there, because not everything feels like it's in our favor, but eventually we realize it was the lesson we needed to learn that allows us to develop to be who we're supposed to be.
Well, that's exactly right. And I also think that one of the traps of our society is that especially when you're young and talented and ambitious, it seems like your career is going to be a series of brass rings. But when you get up close, you start realizing that the time in between those hits of endorphins stretches out. It's not, you're not going to have a test every week, or no one's going to celebrate your outcome of that particular test. So at some point, you're going to have to love the journey, because there's going to be a year where you're doing stuff, but if it's a 2-year gig, there's no brass ring at the end of that, not in a year. And as it stretches out, I think it kind of, at least for me, really forced me to think about, what am I doing this for, and what is it that I like? Because I'm not necessarily just doing it for a win, just doing it for accolades, the way you can fool yourself that you are when you're younger, when the feedback loop is so much quicker.
I love that. That's so true, isn't it? Because as we do get older, we those gaps between the feedback become so much greater, and therefore you've got to find that bit inside you that you get the strength to keep going and you get the motivation to keep going, because you're like, you want to be on your A game. And I look at it now, my little girl's 6, bless her, there's nothing in the world she wouldn't do for a sticker. I look around and it's the same for all of my friends. Like, I don't do that, I'll give you a sticker. And it reminds me of, like, that's what it was like when you were younger. You got those accolades, came so much faster, the feedback was there. And actually it's probably the thing that we lose more as we get older and as we get more senior, because if you're the CEO of something, where do you go for that feedback? Because you're not going to tell anybody you've got a problem in case the board loses confidence in you. You can't tell your direct reports because they're looking to you for the answer. So kind of, where do you go? And unless we get better at seeking it out, what happens is we become our own counsel, and that can have positives and negatives. I mean, brain surgeons can't do brain surgery on themselves for a reason. Right. You've not got the right perspective, have you, when you're looking inward on yourself versus having somebody else hold that mirror up for you and help you see what the rest of the world is seeing.
It's true. One of the most frequent points I make in coaching newly advanced members of my leadership team is I just remind them leadership is lonely, and that's okay. So I've made it a practice to sponsor a weekly lunch for my leadership team. They don't always take me up on it, but they thank me when they do. I'm not there. Talk amongst yourselves because no one else is going to understand it the way you do. You're all at the same level. You're all in the same company. You can speak to your loved ones for a little bit and they'll humor you, but after a while you're just talking at them and they're getting bored. You can talk to me, but I'm your boss, so you might not be comfortable. And you can only talk so much to the people that report to you, to your point. At a certain point, it's just not appropriate. It's so important to build that network and that support structure so that you can keep doing this as long as you want to, because otherwise you put a very nice spin on it. Sometimes being your own counsel works, but a lot of times it doesn't.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I love that you take that initiative with the team, because by doing so, even though you're saying that not everyone takes you up on it, what you're doing is demonstrating to them how important it is that they also take some time. Because I think that's often the thing that we don't do for ourselves, is take those moments. It's like nobody factors in thinking time. And it's like you have to think about some of these things. You have to be creative. You've got to. That's an important part of us developing the business and doing stuff. And I had one organization I worked for where literally they were back to back every day in meetings. It's like, when's anything get done?
Sure.
Just keep having conversations about the actions that you've not got to yet, because you can't get to them because you're in meetings for like the entire time. And I'm like, oh, we've not thought of that. I was like, you've got to factor in some time to think and some time to do, as well as some time to talk, because if not, you can have great conversations and nothing's going to change because you're not kind of taking those activities. David, I could literally chat to you all day. If you had one last bit of insight to share with our audience, what would it be?
So I've been kicking around this idea for a while. I feel like there is a state of the world in which business transformation is thought more highly of, and we aspire to reduce the failure rate of companies by 5%. And the radical value creation outcomes and social outcomes of just that change would be enormous. We've gotten in this space where we think that we can't change something that's pre-existing. We have to start something new. And history tells us that line of thinking is not going to get us where we need to go as a society and for the betterment of our individual goals. So I'm really focused. It's my lifelong passion to just drive awareness and a sense of the possible of business transformation and really change how we think about it. Stop making it a dirty phrase and really start looking at it in terms of, no, this is what we should do. You should recycle, and companies that are in a transformation spot should invest in that rather than walking away.
I love that. It's so true, because as we said at the start of this episode, so much is in the lessons, it's in the learn, isn't it? It's in looking at what went well as what's not going well. And I think sometimes when organizations get to that place where they're facing a transformation, they stop seeing the stuff that's working because all they can see is the problems. Whereas people like you can come in and say, these bits work, let's turn the volume up on those.
Right.
These don't work, let's change them. But actually, it isn't everything needs to be thrown out. It's a case of let's looking at what bits, how do we take the Lego apart and replay and rebuild to make it actually fit for purpose for what we're doing right now, versus well, we'll just give it all away, because that would make such a massive impact on the economy and on society, wouldn't it? And given the impact that has at every level, if we just didn't assume everything was so easily disposable.
Right.
I love that. So, David, how can people get in touch with you?
So I can be reached on LinkedIn. My Twitter and Instagram handle are both at @turnarounddavid, and I can be found on my website, abraxasgp.com.
Perfect. We will make sure all of your contact details are in the notes below for people that are listening and watching this. Thank you so very much. It's been a joy as always, and I look forward to next time.
Kim, thank you. Thank you for the time.
Take care.